Read the last page, Naomi Brooks said, and the CEO slapped the folder shut like her voice had offended him. The cafe went quiet in the strange, fragile way crowded places do when everyone realizes something has shifted. A spoon stopped halfway to a woman's mouth. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter, then clicked into silence. Rain tapped against the windows along Madison Avenue, turning the city lights outside into blurred gold ribbons. Grant Whitmore stood beside a corner table in a charcoal suit that looked too expensive for a Tuesday morning, one hand pressed flat over a thick stack of contracts. His jaw was tight. His phone kept vibrating against the polished wood, lighting up with messages from lawyers, board members, and people who had learned never to wait for him. Naomi stood across from him with a paper coffee cup in one hand and a weathered brown envelope tucked under her arm. She had come in out of the rain 10 minutes earlier, ordered tea, and chosen the smallest table near the window. She had not planned to speak. She had only seen the documents when Grant's assistant rushed past and dropped a page near her chair. One page. That was all it took. "You don't know what you're talking about," Grant said, his voice low enough to sound controlled, but sharp enough to cut through the soft jazz playing overhead. Naomi looked at the folder. "I know what happens when people sign things they haven't read." His eyes narrowed. Around them, customers began pretending not to listen. A man in a baseball cap stared at his laptop without typing. 2 college students near the pastry case went still, their hands wrapped around iced coffees. Grant leaned closer, his expression carrying the practiced impatience of someone used to rooms opening for him. "This is a private business meeting." "Then you should keep private business off a public table," Naomi said. Her voice was calm, not loud, not trembling. That seemed to make him angrier. Grant's assistant reached for the folder, but Naomi placed one finger on the final page. "The liability clause is buried under the acquisition language. If you sign it, the company keeps the debt, the lawsuits, all of it. The buyers walk away clean." For 1 second, Grant stared at her. Then his gaze moved over her damp coat, her worn boots, the loose thread near her cuff. He saw what he expected to see, and nothing more. "Security," he said. Ethan Cole, Grant's bodyguard, stepped forward from near the entrance. He was broad-shouldered, quiet, and dressed in a dark coat that barely moved when he walked. Naomi turned toward him, lifting her chin as if she had already decided she would not make this easier for anyone. The brown envelope slipped from beneath her arm and landed beside the chair. A photograph slid halfway out. At the same moment, the collar of her coat shifted. Ethan froze. Just above Naomi's collarbone, barely visible beneath the cafe's warm light, was a pale, curved scar. His breath caught. The rain against the glass suddenly sounded louder. Grant was still talking, still demanding that Naomi leave, but Ethan did not move. He stared at that scar as though it had opened a door he had spent 15 years trying to keep closed. Naomi noticed. Her fingers rose slowly to the edge of her collar. "You remember," she said. Ethan's face drained of color. "That can't be," he whispered. Grant looked between them, irritated now, confused by a silence he could not control. Naomi bent down, picked up the envelope, and held it against her chest. "It can," she said. "And before you sign anything, Mr. Whitmore, you need to know what your father did." Grant Whitmore did not answer at first. He stood beneath the cafe's amber pendant lights with one hand resting on the contract folder, as if keeping his palm there could hold the morning together. Outside, a city bus groaned through the rain. Inside, someone near the counter dropped a sugar packet, and the tiny paper sound seemed too loud. "My father?" Grant finally asked. His voice had changed. It was no longer sharp. It was careful. Naomi looked at him without blinking. "You heard me." Ethan remained still beside the entrance, his eyes fixed on the narrow scar near her collarbone. He had spent 15 years remembering smoke-dark hallways, broken alarms, and a child's voice calling from somewhere beyond the heat and noise. He had told himself that memory belonged to another life, before private security contracts, before tailored coats, before he learned to keep his face unreadable. But the scar was real. The woman standing in front of him was real. "Naomi," he said quietly. She turned toward him. For the first time since she entered the cafe, something in her expression loosened. Not warmth. Not forgiveness. Recognition. "Ethan Cole," she said. Grant looked at his bodyguard. "You know her?" Ethan swallowed once. "I knew a girl named Naomi Brooks." He paused, as if the next words carried more weight than the room could hold. There was a warehouse fire in Queens. 15 years ago. I was a rookie firefighter. Naomi's fingers tightened around the envelope. You pulled me through a loading dock window. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor. You were 13. I was 13, she said. And my sister was 9. Grant's assistant shifted near the table, suddenly unsure where to look. The customers who had been pretending not to listen had stopped pretending. Grant's face hardened again, but it was a different kind of hardness now. Not arrogance. Defense. My father owned Whitmore Industrial, he said. That company had dozens of properties. You cannot walk into a cafe and make accusations based on an old tragedy. Naomi nodded slowly. I did not come here to accuse you. She lifted the envelope. Rainwater had darkened one corner, but the seal was intact. I came because this was supposed to reach you before noon. Grant glanced at the contracts. The clock above the pastry case read 10:17. His board meeting was scheduled for 11:30, 40 blocks downtown, where a sale agreement waited for his signature. Naomi had known that. Who sent you? He asked. No one. Her answer landed softly. I have been trying to decide for 6 months whether you deserve to know. Grant gave a short, humorless breath. Know what? Naomi looked down at the envelope, then back at him. That the company you are about to sell was built on a lie. That the fire was not an accident. And that your father knew the safety system had failed before anyone ever opened that warehouse door. Ethan closed his eyes for one brief second. The cafe smelled of wet wool, coffee grounds, and cinnamon. Grant's phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Naomi stepped closer to the table and placed the envelope beside the unsigned contract. You can have your assistant call the police, she said. You can tell yourself I am confused. But before you do anything else, read what is inside. Grant stared at the envelope as though it might burn through the polished wood. Then Ethan spoke, low and steady. Sir, I think you should. Grant did not touch the envelope. His fingers hovered above it, then pulled back. The seal was plain white, softened at one edge by rain, with his name written across the front in black ink, Grant Whitmore. The handwriting was uneven, old-fashioned, almost careful enough to hurt. His assistant, Marissa Lane, leaned toward him. Mr. Whitmore, we need to leave in 8 minutes if you want to make the board meeting on time. Grant did not look at her. Cancel the car. Marissa blinked. Sir, I said cancel it. The words came out flat. Final. She stepped away, already reaching for her phone. Naomi watched him with the same stillness she had carried since the moment she walked through the cafe door. Her tea had gone cold beside the window. A thin ring of steam no longer rose from the cup. Ethan moved closer to the table, not like a bodyguard now, but like someone returning to a place he had never truly left. The warehouse was on 48th Street, he said, near the old freight yards. It had a loading bay on the east side and offices above it. Naomi nodded once. My mother worked nights there, sorting inventory. She took my sister and me because she could not afford a babysitter. Grant finally picked up the envelope. The paper made a soft sound beneath his thumb. What does this have to do with my father? Naomi looked toward the rain-streaked window. Across the street, umbrellas moved along the sidewalk like dark flowers opening and closing. The building had failed inspections, she said. Not 1. 3. The alarm system did not work. The exit signs were broken. The side doors were chained because someone said people were stealing supplies. Her voice stayed even, but her eyes did not leave the glass. My mother told the manager. Other workers told him too. Ethan's shoulders tightened. He remembered the building differently than the news reports had described it. The reports had said electrical accident, unavoidable conditions, tragic loss. They had never mentioned the doors. They had never mentioned a child trying to guide her little sister toward a stairwell that would not open. Grant broke the seal. Inside were 3 things: a faded photograph, a photocopy of an inspection report, and a letter folded into quarters. He lifted the photograph first. It showed a warehouse exterior under a pale winter sky. A company logo was visible above the loading dock, Whitmore Industrial. In the corner stood a younger man in a dark overcoat, his face turned halfway toward the camera. Grant knew that face. His father had the same sharp brow, the same narrow mouth, the same way of standing as if the world had been built to wait for him. Where did you get this? Grant asked. Naomi reached into her coat pocket and placed a small brass key on the table. It was blackened around the edges. My sister found it that night, she said. It opened the office where the inspection files were kept. Grant looked at the key, then at Naomi. Your sister? The question hung between them. Naomi lowered her eyes. She did not make it out. No one spoke. The cafe had returned to its ordinary sounds, but they felt far away now. Milk steaming, a register drawer closing, rain ticking against glass. Grant unfolded the letter with both hands. The first line was addressed to him. His breath stopped. It was written by his father. And beneath the date, 15 years old, was a sentence Grant had never seen before. If anything happens at the 48th Street property, do not let them connect it to the board. Grant read the sentence again. Then once more, slower. The letters seemed to tighten beneath his eyes, each one carrying a weight that did not belong in a quiet cafe on a rainy morning. If anything happens at the 48th Street property, do not let them connect it to the board. He lowered the page, but he did not let go of it. His face had lost its color. Marissa stood a few feet away with her phone pressed to her chest, waiting for instructions that never came. Ethan looked toward Naomi. How did you get this letter? Naomi did not answer immediately. She reached for her tea, then stopped when she felt the cold cup against her fingertips. My mother kept it, she said. She found it in the manager's office after the inspectors came through. She thought it was proof that someone knew the building was dangerous. Grant shook his head once. My father would not have written this. It sounded less like a denial than a request. Naomi met his eyes. I used to say the same thing about my mother. I used to say she would come home. The rain had softened outside, but the windows still carried gray streaks down their glass. A delivery truck rolled past, tires whispering over wet pavement. Grant folded the letter with care, almost reverence, and set it beside the photograph. Why did she not go to the police? He asked. She tried. Naomi's answer was quiet. They said the company had lawyers. They said she did not have enough evidence. Then she got sick. Bills came. Work disappeared. People stopped returning her calls. Her thumb brushed the edge of the brass key. By the time I was old enough to understand what she had been fighting for, she was gone too. Ethan looked down. His hands were clenched at his sides. The official report said the alarms failed because of a power surge, he said. It said emergency exits were accessible. Naomi gave a small, tired smile that held no amusement. Reports can say anything when the people writing them have never stood at a locked door. Grant flinched. It was almost invisible, but Naomi saw it. She saw the man who had walked into the cafe with a deal waiting, a schedule waiting, a world arranged around his name. Now he stood over a photograph of a building his family had owned, holding proof that the foundation beneath him might have been built on silence. His phone buzzed again. This time the screen showed a name, Harold Vance, chairman of the board. Grant stared at it until the call stopped. A second later, another message appeared. The buyers are waiting. Do not make this difficult. Naomi watched his eyes move across the words. That is why I came today, she said. The sale agreement includes a clause that transfers the old property claims into a shell company. Once you sign, the people who lost everything will have nowhere left to go. Marissa looked up sharply. That cannot be right. It is on page 47, Naomi said. Under historical asset separation. Grant opened the contract folder. His hands were steady now, but only because he was forcing them to be. He turned pages. 43, 44, 45. The cafe clock ticked above the pastry case. 46. Then 47. His eyes stopped. Ethan stepped beside him and read over his shoulder. The clause was there, buried beneath language so polished it almost sounded harmless. Grant's lips parted, but no words came. Naomi picked up the brass key and closed it inside his palm. You asked what this has to do with your father, she said. It has everything to do with what you choose to become. Grant closed his fingers around the brass key, but it did not feel small in his hand. It felt heavy, cold, and older than the polished table beneath it. He looked down at page 47 again. The clause was written in the language of accountants and attorneys, smooth and bloodless, designed to make abandonment sound like procedure. Historical asset separation. Limited successor liability. Final release of prior claims. He had seen phrases like that his entire career. He had signed papers with language like that. He had trusted people who spoke in calm voices and wore dark suits to explain what mattered and what did not. But now Naomi stood across from him, rain still shining along the shoulders of her coat. and every polished word on the page seemed to point back to a locked door on 48th Street. Who put this in the agreement? Grant asked. Marissa hesitated. The buyer's legal team drafted the final version. Harold Vance approved the revisions yesterday. Grant lifted his eyes. Did he explain this section? He said it was standard protection. Naomi gave a quiet breath through her nose. Standard protection for whom? No one answered. The question stayed between them, sharper than any accusation. Ethan moved toward the window and looked out at the traffic. His reflection hovered in the wet glass, older than the man he remembered from the firehouse. There were people outside that warehouse, he said. Families. Workers. They kept asking if everyone had gotten out. His voice was low, almost lost beneath the sound of the cafe grinder. We did not know what to tell them. Naomi watched him. My mother stood outside for 3 hours with a blanket around her shoulders. She kept asking about my sister. Ethan turned from the window. His face tightened. I am sorry. Naomi nodded once, accepting the words without pretending they could repair anything. Grant's phone began to ring again. Harold Vance. The name flashed across the screen like a warning light. Grant let it ring twice, then answered. Where are you? Harold asked without greeting. His voice was smooth, impatient, familiar. The board is assembled. The buyers have been waiting. Grant looked at the contract, then at the letter from his father. I am reviewing the agreement. A pause. You reviewed it last night. Not this section. The silence on the line changed. It became deliberate. Grant, Harold said, do not let a minor historical issue derail a transaction that keeps this company alive. Naomi heard the words. Her expression did not change, but her fingers curled around the strap of her bag. Grant's gaze stayed on her. A minor historical issue, he repeated. The old warehouse claims were settled years ago. Your father handled it. We all handled it. There is nothing left to discuss. Grant looked down at the brass key in his palm, its blackened edge pressed into his skin. There is a letter, he said. Harold did not answer. There are inspection reports. Still nothing. Then Harold spoke, softer now. You need to get to the boardroom. We can discuss whatever someone has put in front of you after the sale is complete. Grant ended the call. He did not slam the phone down. He simply placed it face down beside the contract. Marissa stared at him. What are you going to do? Grant looked toward Naomi. A few minutes ago, he had dismissed her as an interruption. Now he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the restraint in her posture, the cost of carrying proof no one wanted to see. I am going to the board meeting, he said. Naomi's face went still. Grant picked up the letter, the photograph, and the inspection report. But I am not going there to sign. Naomi did not move when Grant said it. For a moment, she only looked at him across the table, as though she had heard promises before and had learned to measure them by what came after the words. The cafe clock read 10:29. Outside, the rain had thinned to a silver mist, and a narrow strip of pale daylight appeared between the buildings across the avenue. Marissa checked her phone again. The boardroom is at Whitmore Tower. We can be there in 20 minutes if traffic moves. Grant gathered the documents into a neat stack. The letter from his father went on top, then the inspection report, then the photograph. He placed the brass key in his inside jacket pocket, close to his chest. Naomi is coming with us, he said. Marissa looked at Naomi, then at Grant. Sir, the board will not allow an uninvited guest into a closed meeting. Then they can explain why they are afraid to hear her. Ethan stepped closer to Naomi. His voice was quiet. You do not have to go. Naomi glanced toward the window. Her reflection stared back at her through the fading rain. A woman in a damp coat holding a life that had been reduced to an envelope and a scar. I know, she said, but I have spent too long letting other people decide where I belong. Grant looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not comfort, not relief. Recognition of a debt he could not yet name. They left the cafe together. The bell above the door gave one soft chime as cold air rushed in around them. On the sidewalk, taxis cut through puddles and pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas. Grant's black sedan waited at the curb, its engine running. The driver opened the rear door. Naomi stopped. I am not riding in the back with you, she said. Grant nodded immediately. Then you can sit wherever you want. She chose the front passenger seat beside the driver. Ethan sat in the back with Grant, while Marissa took the middle seat, her tablet balanced on her knees. For several blocks, no one spoke. The city moved past in wet flashes of storefronts, traffic lights, and steam rising from subway grates. Grant watched Naomi through the space between the seats. She kept one hand folded over the strap of her bag. The other rested near the window, her fingertips following the cold glass without touching it. "What was your sister's name?" he asked. Naomi did not turn around. "Tessa." Grant repeated it softly. "Tessa Brooks." "She liked orange soda," Naomi said. "She hated the crust on grilled cheese sandwiches. She wanted to be a veterinarian because she thought every animal needed someone who could understand them." Her voice did not break. That made the words harder to hear. Ethan looked down at his hands. Marissa stopped typing. Grant stared at the rain sliding down the window beside him. He had a younger sister once too, Caroline. She had loved old movies and hated being told what to do. For years, he had believed his father's version of the warehouse fire because believing it had been easier than asking questions. "I did not know," Grant said. Naomi finally turned toward him. "That is the problem," she replied. "People with power do not have to know. They can choose not to." The sedan slowed in front of Whitmore Tower, a wall of glass rising 38 stories into the gray sky. Employees moved through the revolving doors with badges and coffee cups, their faces turned toward another ordinary workday. Grant opened his door, then paused. "Naomi," he said. She looked at him. "I cannot undo what happened." "No," she said. "You cannot." He nodded, accepting it. Then he stepped onto the sidewalk and looked up at the building bearing his family name. For the first time, it did not look like a monument. It looked like a question. The lobby of Whitmore Tower smelled of polished stone, fresh coffee, and the faint citrus cleaner used on the glass doors. Naomi walked beside Ethan through the security gates while Grant and Marissa followed a few steps behind. Heads turned as they crossed the marble floor. People recognized Grant immediately. They always did. But today, his pace was slower, and the woman in the damp brown coat beside his bodyguard did not look like anyone from his usual world. At the elevator bank, a receptionist glanced at Naomi's name written on the visitor tablet. "Ms. Brooks is not on the board access list," she said. Grant did not raise his voice. "Add her." The receptionist looked uncertain. "Mr. Vance gave specific instructions that only directors and counsel may enter the 36th floor." Grant pressed the elevator button. "Then Mr. Vance can explain those instructions to me himself." The doors opened with a soft chime. Inside, the elevator walls reflected them in fragments. Grant in charcoal gray, Marissa with her tablet held tight against her chest, Ethan standing broad and silent, Naomi with rain drying in dark patches along her sleeves. The doors closed. The elevator rose. 10, 15, 22. No one spoke until Naomi looked at the brass key outlined beneath Grant's jacket. "My mother said your father kept a private office on the 36th floor," she said. Grant's eyes lifted toward the floor numbers. "He did. She said he locked the real records there." Marissa turned toward Grant. "There are archived files in the executive suite. Most of them were digitized after your father passed away." "Most," Naomi repeated. "Not all." The elevator reached 36 with a quiet bell. When the doors opened, the hallway beyond was carpeted in deep blue, lined with framed photographs of factory openings, ribbon cuttings, and smiling men in hard hats. Grant's father appeared in nearly every picture. In one, he stood in front of a new warehouse with a hand on a younger Grant's shoulder. Grant stopped before it. He could not have been more than 12. His father's smile was wide, confident, untouched by doubt. Naomi looked at the photograph for only a second. "That was the year before the fire," she said. Grant did not answer. At the far end of the hall, double doors stood open to the boardroom. Voices drifted out, tense and impatient. Harold Vance stood near the long glass table, speaking with two attorneys and a group of buyers in dark coats. When he saw Naomi, his expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. It was quick, but Ethan saw it. "You," Harold said. Naomi's shoulders went still. Grant stepped forward. "You know her?" Harold adjusted his cufflink. "I know of her. Her mother caused a great deal of trouble after the accident." The words landed in the hallway like cold water. Naomi did not look away. "My mother asked why the emergency doors were locked," she said. Harold gave a thin smile. "Your mother was grieving. People say many things when they are grieving." Ethan took one step closer, his voice low. "I was there. The doors were locked." Harold's smile disappeared. The boardroom behind him fell quiet. Grant looked from Ethan to Harold, then to Naomi. For the first time, The question was no longer buried in an old letter or hidden in legal language. It was standing in front of him, breathing, waiting for an answer. Harold Vance did not step aside. He stood in the doorway with one hand resting against the frame, his silver hair neat, his navy tie perfectly centered, as if order in his appearance could make the past obey him. Behind him, the boardroom held 12 people around a long glass table. Legal pads, water glasses, open laptops, a wall screen showing the Whitmore Industrial logo beside the words Strategic Acquisition Approval. Every face turned toward the hallway. Grant held the folder from the cafe at his side. "Let us go in," he said. Harold's eyes moved to the documents, then to Naomi. "This is not the place for a personal grievance." Naomi gave a small nod. "You are right," she said. "It should have been handled 15 years ago." The room went still. Grant stepped past Harold, and after a brief hesitation, Harold moved aside. Naomi entered with Ethan beside her. The carpet softened their footsteps, but the silence made every movement feel louder. At the head of the table, Grant placed the contract folder down without opening it. "The acquisition vote is postponed," he said. One of the buyers, a woman with a red leather portfolio, sat forward. "Mr. Whitmore, our teams have been working on this for 9 months. "Then they can work one more day," Grant replied. Harold closed the boardroom door. The click of the latch sounded final. "Grant, this is reckless." "No," Grant said. "Reckless is signing a clause that erases liability for a warehouse fire before asking why it is there." Marissa connected her tablet to the wall screen. Her hands shook only slightly as she pulled up page 47. The clause appeared in large black text against a white background. Several directors leaned closer. An attorney near the far end adjusted his glasses. "This is a routine asset separation provision," he said. "It is not routine if it was designed to bury claims from a building where people were trapped behind locked exits," Ethan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. Harold turned toward him. "You were a junior firefighter. You did not have access to the investigation." Ethan met his eyes. "I had access to the doors." Naomi placed the old photograph on the glass table. Then the inspection report. Then the letter. The papers looked fragile beneath the bright ceiling lights. "My mother saved copies because she knew no one would believe her," Naomi said. She did not have a boardroom. She did not have attorneys. She had 2 daughters and a job in a building that should never have been open. Harold's expression tightened. "Your mother received a settlement." Naomi looked at him. "She received enough money to pay hospital bills and rent for a few months. That is not justice. That is a receipt." Grant stared at the letter from his father. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass table beneath it. "Did you know about this?" he asked Harold. Harold did not answer. Grant's voice lowered. "Did you know my father had been warned?" Harold's gaze shifted toward the directors, searching for support. No one spoke. The red portfolio woman closed her notebook. One of the older directors removed his glasses and set them down carefully. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out one final item. A small cassette recorder, scratched along the edges, with a label in faded blue ink. "My mother recorded a conversation with the property manager 2 days before the fire," she said. "He said Mr. Vance told him not to spend another dollar on repairs." Harold's face changed. It was only a flicker, but it was enough. Grant saw it, and so did everyone else. No one reached for the cassette recorder. It sat in the center of the glass table beside the inspection report, small and worn, its plastic surface catching the white light from above. Harold Vance stared at it, as though it had spoken already. Naomi placed her hand over it. Not possessive, just steady. "My mother kept this in a shoebox beneath her bed," she said. "She told me that if anyone ever asked what happened, I should not let them call it an accident." Grant looked at Marissa. "Can it play?" Marissa nodded slowly. "There is an audio adapter in the media cabinet." Harold stepped forward at once. "This is absurd. A 15-year-old recording with no verified chain of custody is not evidence. It is theater." Naomi lifted her eyes to him. "You called my mother a problem when she was alive. Now you are calling her proof theater." The words were quiet, but they moved through the room with force. One of the directors shifted in his chair. The buyer with the red portfolio closed her laptop. Ethan stood beside Naomi, his gaze fixed on Harold. "Play it," Grant said. Marissa crossed to the cabinet and returned with a small adapter. Her hands were more certain now. She connected the recorder to the room speakers, then pressed the button. At first there was only static, thin and dry, like rain against an old window. Then a woman's voice came through. Tired. Careful. Naomi's mother. Mr. Daniels, the alarms are still not working. The exit signs are out. You said repairs were coming. A man answered, his voice muffled but clear enough. I told Vance we need the money. The room did not breathe. The recording continued. What did he say? Naomi's mother asked. A pause followed. Then the man spoke again. He said the board is cutting costs. He said nobody is going to shut down a warehouse over a few lights. The static returned. A chair creaked somewhere near the far end of the table. Then the recording ended with a soft click. Harold's face had gone pale, but his voice stayed measured. That could be anyone. Grant looked at him. Is it? Harold did not answer. Grant turned to the directors. Did any of you know the repairs were delayed? An older director named Samuel Pierce lowered his gaze. His hands rested on a leather portfolio that had not been opened. There were discussions, he said. Your father said the property was temporary. He said the budget would be corrected after the quarter closed. Grant stared at him. And you accepted that? Samuel looked older suddenly. We trusted him. Naomi gave a small, bitter breath. That is what people say when trust costs them nothing. Harold's control finally cracked around the edges. You do not understand what this company was facing, he said. Thousands of jobs. Debt. Investors ready to walk away. Decisions had to be made. Decisions, Naomi repeated. You mean choices. Grant looked down at the letter in front of him. His father's handwriting seemed to pull him backward through every childhood dinner, every speech about responsibility, every photograph in the hallway outside. He had spent years believing Whitmore Industrial stood for endurance. Now he understood that endurance was not the same as integrity. His phone lit up with a message from the buyers. Final confirmation required immediately. Grant picked it up, read it, and set it back down. There will be no confirmation, he said. Harold leaned toward him. If you stop this sale, the company could collapse. Grant met his eyes. Then it will collapse telling the truth, not hiding behind my father's name. The boardroom stayed silent after Grant spoke. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan spread beneath a low gray sky, its towers blurred by rain and distance. Inside, the air felt thinner. Harold Vance stood near the end of the table, one hand resting against the back of a chair, his expression fixed in the calm shape of a man who had spent decades surviving difficult rooms. You are making an emotional decision, he said. That is exactly what your father would have warned you against. Grant looked at the letter beside his hand. My father warned people against being caught. That is not the same thing. Harold's eyes hardened. You have no idea what it took to keep this company standing. No, Grant said. I do not. But I know what it cost other people. Naomi remained near the window, her coat still on, her bag hanging from one shoulder. She had not asked for a chair. She had not asked for coffee or water. She stood as if she had learned long ago that comfort could be taken away without warning. Grant noticed it, and shame moved through him again, quiet but sharp. He remembered the cafe, the rain on her sleeves, the way he had looked at her and decided she did not belong near his table. Now every person in this room was waiting for her to prove that she did. Harold reached for the contract folder. The acquisition protects nearly 4,000 employees, he said. If this deal fails, factories close. Families lose paychecks. You want to risk that because of a tragedy from 15 years ago. Naomi turned from the window. You keep calling it a tragedy, she said. A tragedy is something no one could stop. This was a choice people made and then covered up. Harold's mouth tightened. And what do you want, Ms. Brooks? Money. The question landed coldly. Ethan shifted beside her, but Naomi lifted one hand slightly, asking him not to speak. She looked at Harold with an exhaustion that was older than the room. My mother wanted someone to admit what happened, she said. My sister deserved to be remembered as more than a number in an old report. I want the records opened. I want the families found. And I want no one to hide behind a contract again. Grant picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Marissa, he said, call outside counsel. Tell them to preserve every archive, every property file, every internal message connected to 48th Street. No deletions. No exceptions. Marissa nodded and stepped into the hallway. Harold gave a short laugh with no humor in it. You are inviting lawsuits. Yes, Grant said, because people were denied the chance to bring them. He turned toward the directors. I am suspending the sale. I am also placing Harold Vance on immediate administrative leave pending an independent investigation. The room stirred at once. Voices rose in fragments. One director objected. Another asked about authority. The buyers gathered their papers with stiff, angry movements. Harold stared at Grant as though he had become a stranger. You cannot do this alone, he said. Grant looked toward Naomi. She did not smile. She did not forgive him, but she did not look away. I am not doing it alone, Grant said. Then he faced the table again. We will vote. The vote took less than 3 minutes, but to Grant it felt like standing beneath a storm that had been gathering for 15 years. One by one, the directors raised their hands. Some did it quickly, eyes fixed on the table. Others hesitated, glancing toward Harold Vance as if waiting for him to reclaim the room. The first vote suspended the acquisition. 7 hands. Then 8. The second placed Harold on leave and ordered an independent investigation into the 48th Street fire. 6 hands rose. Then Samuel Pierce lifted his hand slowly, his face pale beneath the boardroom lights. 7. The motion passed. Harold did not speak. He stood at the end of the glass table with his shoulders squared, but the authority he had carried into the room seemed to drain away in silence. A building security officer appeared at the door after Marissa made a quiet call. Ethan stepped aside to let him enter. Harold looked at Grant one last time. You think this makes you better than your father? He asked. Grant did not look away. No, he said. It means I finally stopped pretending I was not responsible for what his name protected. Harold's gaze shifted to Naomi. For a moment, his face softened into something almost human, almost regretful. Then it closed again. He picked up his coat and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Naomi stood still beside the window. The rain had stopped. Far below, sunlight broke through the clouds in narrow bands, catching on wet rooftops and taxi roofs. It was not warm light. Not yet. But it was there. Grant turned toward her. There were 100 things he could have said. He could have apologized for the cafe. He could have apologized for the years she spent carrying what his family had buried. He could have offered money, lawyers, a public statement, anything that might make him feel less ashamed. But Naomi had spent too long hearing words from people who had the power to act. So he did not begin with an apology. The company will fund an independent search for every family affected by the fire, he said. We will open the records, publish the findings, and create a compensation fund that is not tied to silence. Naomi studied him. Will you put that in writing? Grant nodded. Today. Will you make it public before the lawyers tell you not to? Yes. Will you say your father's company failed those people? Grant's throat tightened. Yes. She looked down at the cassette recorder on the table. Then start with their names. The room fell quiet again. Marissa returned with a legal pad and a pen. She placed them in front of Grant. On the inspection report, beneath the technical notes and faded stamps, was a list of workers scheduled for the night shift. Naomi had marked several names in blue ink. Her mother's name was there. Tessa's name was not. Children did not appear on employee lists. Grant picked up the pen. His hand shook once, then steadied. He read the first name aloud, then the second, then the third. Each name entered the room and stayed there. Samuel Pierce lowered his head. One of the attorneys wiped his eyes and looked away. Naomi listened without moving. When Grant reached the final name, he paused. He looked at her. Tessa Brooks, he said. Naomi closed her eyes. Only for a second. When she opened them, the anger was still there. So was the grief. But beneath both was something quieter. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just the beginning of being heard. By late afternoon, the rain had cleared completely. Sunlight stretched across the boardroom floor in long pale rectangles, touching the edge of the glass table where the old cassette recorder still rested. The buyers were gone. Most of the directors had left to make calls, cancel meetings, and prepare statements that would reach the press before the market closed. Only Grant, Naomi, Ethan, and Marissa remained. The room felt different without the pressure of witnesses. Quieter, more honest. Marissa placed a printed document in front of Naomi. This is the emergency resolution, she said. The sale is suspended. The archive preservation order is active. The independent investigation begins tomorrow morning. Naomi read every line. She did not rush. Grant watched her from across the table, knowing that she had spent years being asked to trust documents written by people who had never earned it. When she finished, she placed the pages down. There is one thing missing, she said. Marissa looked at the document. What is that? The community. Naomi tapped the paper with one finger. Do not make another committee full of people who work in this building. The families need seats. The workers need seats. People who remember what it was like when no one answered the phone. Grant nodded. You are right. He turned to Marissa. At a survivor and family advisory panel. They choose their own representatives. The company does not choose for them. Marissa began typing. Naomi looked at Grant for a long moment. Why are you doing this? She asked. He could have answered with guilt. He could have said because he owed her. Both would have been true. But neither was enough. Because I spent my whole life believing responsibility belonged to the people who came before me, he said. I thought I could inherit the good parts and leave the rest buried. I was wrong. Naomi's gaze dropped to the scar near her collarbone, visible where her coat had slipped open. Grant noticed it and looked away, giving her the space he had failed to give her that morning. At the cafe, he said, his voice low, I treated you like you were an inconvenience. I made an assumption about you before I heard one word you said. I am sorry. Naomi did not soften immediately. You did more than make an assumption. Grant nodded. You are right. The silence that followed was not comfortable, but it was necessary. Ethan stood near the window, watching the city brighten beneath the clearing sky. There is something I should have said years ago, he told Naomi. She turned toward him. When I found you that night, you kept asking about Tessa. You would not let go of my sleeve. His voice caught, then steadied. I told you I would look for her. I did. But I should have kept looking after the reports were filed. I should have asked more questions. Naomi held his gaze. You were a rookie, she said. You were trying to help. Ethan nodded, but his eyes stayed wet. I still remember you telling me not to leave her. Naomi looked out at the city. I was 13, she said. I thought if I said it enough times, someone could change what happened. Grant picked up the brass key from the table and placed it gently in front of her. This belongs to you, he said. Naomi closed her fingers around it. No, she replied. It belongs in the records. Then she stood, lifted her bag onto her shoulder, and walked toward the door. Grant did not stop her. He only said, We will not close them again. Naomi paused with her hand on the handle. Make sure you do not, she said. Then she stepped into the hallway, leaving the room full of light and the people inside it with work that had only just begun. The elevator doors closed behind Naomi with a soft metallic hush. Grant stood in the hallway for several seconds, staring at the empty space she had left behind. Outside the windows, the city had changed color. The rain was gone. Sunlight rested on the streets below, catching in puddles and turning them briefly gold before passing cars broke the reflections apart. Ethan came to stand beside him. Neither man spoke. There was nothing useful left to say. Not yet. On the 36th floor, framed photographs of Grant's father still lined the walls. Factory openings. Charity dinners. Handshakes. Smiles preserved behind glass. Grant looked at them differently now. He saw not only what had been built, but what had been hidden beneath it. Marissa stepped out of the boardroom with her tablet held against her chest. The first statement is ready, she said. The press team wants to know how much we are saying today. Grant looked toward the elevator doors. Everything we can prove, he said, and everything we are still trying to understand. Marissa nodded. There will be consequences. There should be, Grant replied. Down on the sidewalk, Naomi stepped into the late afternoon light. Her coat was dry now. The air smelled clean after the storm, mixed with warm pavement and roasted chestnuts from a cart near the corner. She stood for a moment beneath the shadow of Whitmore Tower and looked up at the glass rising above her. For 15 years, that name had felt like a locked door. A place where voices like her mother's disappeared behind polished walls and legal language. Today, the door had opened. Not because the building had changed. Not because powerful people had suddenly become kind. It had opened because she had refused to stay silent. She reached into her bag and touched the brass key. She had taken it back from the table before leaving, not to keep it hidden, but to bring it to the investigators herself. It was no longer a piece of the past. It was a promise that the past would be seen. Across the street, Ethan exited the tower and stopped a few feet away from her. He did not crowd her. He did not ask for anything. I found an old report, he said, from the fire department. There is a note in it about a child who kept trying to guide people toward the east stairwell. Naomi looked at him. Tessa. Ethan nodded. The report did not have her name. Naomi's eyes moved toward the traffic, toward the ordinary people crossing the street with grocery bags and headphones and places to be. "It will now," she said. Ethan gave a small nod and walked away. Naomi stayed where she was until the light changed. Then she crossed the street, her boots tapping softly against the wet pavement. High above, Grant stood behind the glass of his office window. He watched her become smaller among the crowd, then disappear beyond the corner. He did not call after her. He did not send someone to stop her. He understood at last that redemption was not a gift he could demand from the person he had wronged. It was work. It was truth spoken when silence would be easier. It was a name read aloud and remembered. On his desk, beside the public statement waiting for his signature, lay the photograph of the old warehouse. Grant picked it up and turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written 3 words, "Do not forget us." He placed the photograph beside the window, where the last light of the day touched it. Then he signed the statement, not with the confidence of a man protecting a legacy, but with the humility of a man finally willing to change it.